The record should reflect that Mr. Holmes is present with his attorneys, and the prosecutors are present as well. We are outside the presence of the jury, and Special Agent Gumbiner is outside the courtroom as well.
I asked him to wait in the hall because I didn't think that's the question.
That was correct. Thank you. All right, let's go through the juror questions now. First, I have the questions that I have marked on the form number 43, and there are multiple questions on the form. The first question is, can you describe the effects of napalm? Any objection from the people?
Well, I don't object, but, you know, I'm not sure that that's within his area of expertise, and it's not a particular question I asked him, so I'm not really sure that he knows the answer. But so I think that if you want to ask that question, I think it needs to be if you know.
Any objection from the defense if I ask if you know?
Yes, Your Honor, it's outside the area of expertise and outside of the disclosures given to the defense.
I will not ask it based on that. I will not ask the next question either, which is the same question with respect to thermite. I'm assuming it's the same objection, right?
Yes.
Mr. Orman?
Well, I can tell you he does know how thermite works and so I don't have any issue with that question. You know, it's a question from the jury about the testimony, so I think that you can ask it.
Okay. Do you think it's within his area of expertise?
Yes, Your Honor.
And
I will tell the court, there's another witness that is our global explosives witness, Mr. Rogopoulos, who I think we're planning on calling later this week, who I would be asking similar questions to. So the court may want to know that.
all right, why don't we handle it that way then? So I'll sustain the defense's objection to that question as well. So I won't ask either one of those questions. The next question is, what are they used for? So that's a similar question. I'm assuming the same objection, Ms. Spengler?
That's correct.
And so I will sustain it, and you can cover it with your other witness. The next question is, as an expert, what is your definition of an incendiary device? Any objection?
Seems like it's a legally defined term in Colorado. We have a statutory definition of an incendiary explosive device, but I do not object to how he understands that term being used. So that's how I understand the question, so I do not object.
Ms. Spengler, do you have any objection?
Yes, I object because we do have a legal definition. It would be confusing to the jury to hear his definition and then be provided with a different definition.
Well, he has used the term incendiary device, though, and so I think what's fair is to ask him what he means when he uses that term. What is that? What does that mean as he uses the term? I think it's fair for him to explain that. So any objection if I modify it that way, just to have him explain what he means by that term, because he has used that term several times today. And I think the jury wants to know, what do you mean by incendiary device? You know, what does that mean to you?
No objection to the reform of the question.
All right, I'll ask it that way as modified. Okay, the next question is on the form that I have marked as number 44. If someone opened the door not knowing that there was a booby trap, would there have been an immediate explosion? Any objection?
No.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
I think it's within his area of expertise, and the cross-examination went into this area, the redirect examination went into that area as well, so I think it's a fair question. So the objection is overruled. I will ask that question. The next question on the same form is approximately how long would it have taken for the devices to explode or catch fire? Any objection
None from the people.
from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. It's outside of what's been disclosed to the defense as part of his expert opinion.
Again, it goes to his expertise. I don't think that this is something that is new or surprising or that hasn't been disclosed. And there was an area that was gone into the cross-examination that I think opens the door to that question as well. Next, I have the questions on form number 45. The first question is, how were their pictures taken from an elevated height? Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Next is,
No objection from the defense.
thank you. Do you know if the handguns on and in the car were loaded? Any objection?
No objection.
Ms. Spengler?
No objection.
Okay, those questions are going to be asked. Next I have, was the suspect looking at pictures or describing from memory? Any objection?
Your Honor, I think that is referring to during the conversation.
That's how I understood it.
I think that, I don't object.
Ms. Spengler?
I don't understand the question.
Was the suspect looking at pictures or describing from memory? I think it's referring to the interview that was conducted by Special Agent Gumbiner and Detective Apple. And the question is, at the time of the interview, was the suspect looking at pictures or describing things from memory?
Or could rephrase the question to during the interview.
That's fine. I think that's fair.
I agree, Your Honor.
The next question is on the form that I have marked as number 47. Do you know if the contents of the bottles actually contained correctly explosive material, if it was tested other than the one destroyed? Any objection?
None for me, Your Honor.
Any objection?
But again, this is information that will come out through different witnesses in the future. So yes.
I'll ask him if he knows. I mean, he may, I think this would be within his knowledge, but I'll add if he knows. With that modification, I will ask the question. Next is the question on the form that I have marked as number 48. You said that Mr. Holmes acted similar to other bombing suspects that you have interviewed. What specifically was similar? What was different about his actions/responses? Before you take a position on this question, let me give you question 52, because they kind of go hand in hand. Maybe you disagree, but I see them as going hand in hand. Number 52 is it common for perpetrators to assist, like Mr. Holmes did, to clear a bomb site after the IEDs did not go off? So, back to 48. What is the people's position as to the question on 48? You said Mr. Holmes acted similar to other bombing suspects you have interviewed. What specifically was similar? What was different about his actions/responses?
I do not object.
And then what about 52?
I do not object.
All right. What's the defense's position with respect to 48 and 52?
Your Honor, we do object. We objected to the original question, and it now appears that there's sort of profiling going on, and we continue to object to this line of questioning.
I don't think it's profiling. I think it's a question about what his observations were and whether there was anything unusual that he noticed. It doesn't go to, the question is not a specific question about was he acting abnormal or normal, which I have said in a previous order gets close to saying, was he acting sane or insane? And I think that those questions would be improper. This is asking, was there anything unusual about your interview? And implicit in that question is, based on other interviews that you've conducted, was there anything unusual? Anything that you noticed that was similar to other interviews? Anything that you noticed that was different from other interviews? The only concern I have is it's a pretty small sample. I think it's only interviewed something like 6 people before, so I don't know, and I didn't know that when I ruled on the previous objection that was made, because that testimony came out later. I think in light of that, the more I think about this, I'm going to err on the side of caution, and I will sustain the defense's objection to both questions. So I will not ask either one of these questions. That should not be interpreted to mean that I think these questions are improper, but I think it just makes sense to err on the side of caution, especially given the sample being so small. Next question is on the form that I have marked as number 49. Did both and let me back up a moment. Let me just supplement the record on the last 2 questions. I think both sides have asked questions related to perhaps not precisely demeanor, but something along those lines. I mean, there were questions that the prosecution has elicited in terms of the officer who made the traffic stop in Winter Park and the defendant's demeanor at that time. There were no objections to that, to those types of questions. The defense has also elicited testimony related to the voicemail on the defendant's cell phone, the voicemail, the answer on the voicemail, the recording that he had on his voicemail, and whether that was unusual or not. And so there has been testimony along these lines by both sides. But again, I'm going to err on the side of caution and not ask those last 2 questions. The question on form number 49, did both detonating remotes need to have line of sight to set off the explosives? Specifically, had someone pushed the detonator on the RC car, would it have set off an explosion? Is there an objection from the people?
I think that if it's prefaced by "if you know," I don't object.
All right. Any objection from the defense with that modification?
If I may have a moment, Judge.
Yes.
Your Honor, we do object. This is information that will come out or will be better suited for an upcoming witness.
He testified about some of this, didn't he?
Did, Your Honor, and I think a large amount of it was on cross-examination, which is why I don't object to it, because I think that the defense brought this up, which is why I think it's proper for the jury to inquire in this area.
I will ask the question, but I will say if you know. The next question I have is on the form that I have marked as number 50. In your expert opinion, did any of the explosive/incendiary contraptions appear in any way to be just for show or designed to intimidate rather than to go off? Any objection?
I don't object, Your Honor, and the reason I don't object is because I think the questions asked on cross-examination open the door to this area of inquiry, and I think it is an appropriate question.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. It calls for speculation, foundation, Rule 16.
It's asking about what it appears to him. I will warn him not to speculate, but to talk about his observations. I think it's a fair question given the cross-examination and the redirect examination. And I think it's within his area of expertise. Next, on the same form, conversely, were there any devices/contraptions that were not immediately visible that posed a significant threat of or danger? Any objection?
I don't object, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection.
The next question is on the form I have marked as number 51. The question is, why did you refuse to speak with the defense team? Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No.
Okay, without objection, I will ask it. And then 52 we've talked about. The question on form 52, I will not ask it based on the record we made. Those are all the questions. I shouldn't say all the questions. Those are the questions that the jury has submitted. Before we bring the jury in, I have indicated before the rule that we've been using in terms of providing any exhibits to the media that have been admitted. And what I indicated is that if there were any exhibits that had written material on them, that those would be provided to the media because they're not visible on the screen that the CCTV camera captures. And so that's what we've been doing. The transcript that was just introduced has written material on it. It's an exhibit that has been admitted, but it wasn't shown on the screen, so it's a little different than the other materials that my earlier ruling applies to. However, as everyone knows, the audio recording was very difficult to understand. So do the people have a position with respect to that transcript?
I don't have a position, but I would note, Your Honor, they could also be provided with the audio recording, which might be easier to understand if it wasn't broadcast through the courtroom. But I don't take a position.
Okay, does the defense have a position, Ms. Nelson?
We object, Your Honor. It wasn't published. The transcript wasn't published on any of these screens, and there's no indication that the media or anyone watching from, well, there's been no request, so that's the reason we object, number one. But number two, there's no indication that it's any easier or more difficult to hear than what observers overheard live in the courtroom.
Do you have any concerns with the court providing it? Other than the ones you've stated before?
Concerns with the court providing the transcript?
Right.
We object. It's not appropriate to provide the media with an exhibit that wasn't published in open court.
Well, it was published in open court. I mean, the audio was published. The transcript was not shown on the screen, but the audio is of poor quality. The request that was made earlier, a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a week ago, included all the exhibits that were admitted in court, and I think that were shown in court, published in court. This is a little bit different. I'll have to go back and look at that motion and see if it includes this. I'm just, because of my ruling, I wanted to bring it up to the parties. I'll go back and check on the motion that was filed. I don't know whether the motion was limited to what is shown on the camera. If it is, then this would not come within the scope of that. But, so we'll do it that way. I'll go back and look at the motion that was filed and my ruling, and then we'll go from there.
Will the court notify the parties before publishing to the media?
I will tell you if
providing
I
to
decide,
media.
I will tell you if I decide to publish it. Frankly, I'm inclined to. I don't know what the concern is, but to the extent that there hasn't been a request made, then I won't do it, and I will tell you before I make a final decision on that. So, okay, let's bring the jury in, please.
Should I have it, Governor, come around?
Yes, please. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury has joined us again. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch. All right. As you know, at the end of the morning session, there were some questions that you had submitted for Special Agent Gumbiner, and Special Agent Gumbiner is now back on the witness stand. I will remind you that you're still under oath, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, Special Agent, there are some questions that the jury has submitted. Some of them I have found to be appropriate under the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law. And so I'm going to ask those questions now. The first question is, as an expert, what is your definition, or excuse me, as an expert, what do you mean when you say incendiary device?
When we talk about an incendiary device, you're taking a mixture that will not explode but will catch fire, and it will burn. Instead of getting an explosion, such as an improvised explosive device, you will get an explosion, say a pipe bomb, for example. The other example is if you don't get the explosion, the two ingredients, an energetic material, which are a fuel and an oxidizer, and the oxidizer provides the oxygen for that explosive, it will burn or be an incendiary device. So you won't get the explosion, it will just continue to burn until all of the ingredients have consumed itself.
The next question is, if someone opened the door not knowing that there was a booby trap, would there have been an immediate explosion?
I don't think there would have been. If they opened the door would not have hit the tripwire. It would take somebody to enter that apartment in order for that booby trap to initiate.
Next question, approximately how long would it have taken for the devices to explode or catch fire?
It would have been instantaneous. As soon as that tripwire would have been initiated, any spark that would hit the floor, the whole apartment would have exploded.
The next question is, how were these pictures taken from an elevated height?
From the doorway or from the theater?
It doesn't specify. It just says, how were these pictures taken from an elevated height?
So at the theater, the pictures of the vehicle were taken, I believe, from our evidence response team, from the elevated area. From the apartment, we took pictures from the doorway utilizing not only screenshots from the robot, but also a long-range camera that we had in the hallway.
Do you know if the handguns on and in the car were loaded?
That I do not know.
The next question, during the interview, was the suspect looking at pictures or describing from memory?
From memory.
The next question, do you know if the contents of the bottles actually contain correctly explosive material if it was tested other than the one destroyed? Again, only if you know.
So the Sprite bottles had gasoline in them. I actually pulled them out of the apartment, and you could certainly smell that it was gasoline. The 6-inch firework balls had smokeless powder in them because we could see that when we entered the apartment.
did both detonating remotes need to have a line of sight to set off the explosives? Specifically, had someone pushed the detonator on the RC car, would it have set off an explosion? Again, only if you know.
So the launch control system that was located inside his apartment with the remote control that was left by his plant, we believe that that was not armed, and if anybody would hit the button, nothing would happen. The pyrotechnic firing box that was located in the kitchen above the refrigerator, the defendant placed the remote control of that outside by the dumpster by the remote control car. It's my belief that if somebody would have found that remote and that RC car and tried to play with the car utilizing that remote, it would have set the apartment off and it would have exploded.
The next question. In your expert opinion, did any of the explosive/incendiary contraptions appear in any way to be just for show or designed to intimidate rather than to go off? Do not speculate as you answer this question. Answer it only based on your expertise and any observations that you made.
They were designed to kill or maim anybody that was inside that apartment when they initiated.
Conversely, were there any devices/contraptions that were not immediately visible that posed a significant threat or danger?
No, most of the devices were located inside his living room.
Next question. Why did you refuse to speak with the defense team?
It's my decision whether or not to speak to the defense team, and as an FBI agent, when we get done with an interview, with investigative duties, we write reports, and we stand by those reports. And that's what was my decision, to stand by the reports that I wrote right after this incident, and I did not want to meet and be re-interviewed regarding my actions on those days, quite a few days afterwards, where I could possibly say something that was incorrect or say something that was not in my reports.
Any follow-up questions based on those questions, Mr. Orman?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Spengler, may this witness be released from his subpoena?
Your Honor, I'd like to keep him under subpoena. I doubt very much I'll need to use that, but I would like to keep him under subpoena.
Okay. Sir, you are subject to recall by the prosecution. I don't know whether you've been subpoenaed by the defense, but if you have, then they can call you as well. So you're relieved or released for now, but you may be called again.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Call your next witness, please. Ms. Tish McGuire.
Maria Carbonell.
Good afternoon. Can I have you raise your right hand for me so I can administer an oath? Do you solemnly swear or affirm on a penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please be seated. Why don't you hand me all these pictures, transcript?
Oh, okay.
Ms. Tish McGuire, do you want to put these back? Actually,
Yes, sure.
I can reach.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Actually, I think I may proceed. Could you please tell us your full name and spell your first and last name?
My name is Maria Angela Carbonell,
Can you spell your first, middle, and last names?
Mariaangela Carbonell.
All right, you may proceed, Mr. Schmaguire.
Thank you. Were you at the Century 16 movie theater on July 19th of 2012 in Aurora, Colorado?
Yes, I was.
Did that go into the early morning hours of July 20th of 2012?
Yes, I did.
Why were you going to that movie theater that day?
That day, myself and my two children,
I'm going to ask you to speak in the microphone a little bit more.
like this.
Thanks.
Is this better? Okay. I was going there to meet my friends from Red Robin, and I brought my two children with me. And we were there to see The Dark Knight Rises.
Was there a special occasion that you were going to the movie that night?
Yeah, it was, well, the movie itself was a special occasion, but it was also Alex Sullivan's birthday.
Now, what time did you get to the movie theater that night?
Myself and my children, we arrived fairly early. I want to say maybe around 6:37. We were kind of tailgating, I guess. There we met Alex, and I'm going to refer to him as Sully because that was how we call him. So Sully, Annalise Armando, and myself, we were there, as well as Edgar, Chris, and Jasmine. We were all just kind of hanging out, waiting in line. We were playing Uno. They were watching, I believe, one of the Batman movies or another show on my friend Edgar's laptop. We ate really bad nachos, my daughter and I, and we were just having fun. We waited there until we were allowed to go into the theater.
And how old were your children at the time?
Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to move that microphone. You're very soft-spoken.
Oh, like this?
So speak right into it,
Like,
please.
is this okay like this?
That's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. What did you say?
How old were your children at the time?
My son Armando was 12, and my daughter Annalise was 15.
At some point in time, did you guys have an opportunity to get into the movie theater?
Yes. And we were there. We were having a really just fun time. It was the first time that Annalise and Armando met Sully, and it was really great because Sully, he gave my son a Dark Knight Rises hat and a keychain, and it was the first time that Sully had ever met my son, and my son thought he was just so happy and was just shocked. And it was really cool because the two of them talked about comics, and I was really happy that the two of them were able to meet because they both love comics so much, and it was nice. And we found really great seeds, and it was funny. My kids were fighting over my son's Slurpee. We were having like a lot of fun.
At some point in time, did the movie start?
Yes.
What happened during your movie?
So I was watching the movie, and I was really into the scene, and I saw the exit door open, and at first I thought, how rude. I thought maybe it was an employee or something coming in, and I didn't really pay attention. And I heard someone yell, "You," profanity. I'm not going to say it. And I was like, wow, what a jerk. And then I remember hearing like a poof and like a tss. It sounded like a tear gas, like a T-shirt gun. And I remember hearing that, and I thought, just maybe they were shooting out T-shirts. But then I heard this clank, and when I remember hearing the clank, and my son, he jumped up and he yelled, "Stink bomb!" And I grabbed him by the back of his pants and I yanked him down. And I then grabbed my friend Jasmine Kennedy that was sitting right next to me, and I told her, "Jasmine, get down." And I remember just hearing like boom, 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 and then looking, because my son was sitting to the left of me, and my friend Jasmine and Chris and Edgar and Sully and everyone was sitting to the right. And I remember looking down at my son, and I was watching this smoke billow out from underneath the chairs. And right away I started to panic because I was thinking, oh no, Armando doesn't have an inhaler on him, and he's going to have an asthma attack. And I grabbed my coat that I had, and I put it over my nose so that I could breathe. And I remember like not being able to breathe and my eyes burning. And I remember looking at Armando and Annalise, and I could see that Armando had his t-shirt covered over his mouth like this, and I could see my daughter. She was huddled next to him, but all I could see was her legs in the back of her. And things just kind of got really quiet for me.
What's the next thing you remember?
I remember having my arms around Jasmine, and I had my hands on Armando's pants still. I didn't let go of them. And I had my arms around Jasmine, and I was rubbing her back and telling her that it was okay. And she was really upset, and she was like, "Marie, I don't know what to do. I've never been in anything like this before." And I was just like, "Jasmine, you just have to calm down. You have to calm down." And at some point, I remember feeling like a sting go across my thigh, and hearing like little beads like bouncing all around me. And I remember Jasmine letting out this screech and screaming for her mom.
Objection, relevance.
Overruled?
And I was just telling her, I was like, "You have to calm down." And I kept telling myself that somebody's going to stop this, like this is going to stop. And when it wasn't stopping, I started thinking to myself, how am I going to get the two of them to be quiet so that we could play dead? And then I remember hearing people say, "Run." And I look down the aisle, and I didn't see, I already seen that Bryson and Tony and Annalise were going. And so I got up and I calmly grabbed my purse from underneath the seat, and I grabbed my son's hand, and we started walking towards the left aisle. And at some point, I lost Armando's hand. He kind of just went. And I got towards the end of the aisle, and I stepped down that first step, and I looked back, and I was yelling for Jasmine to run. And I was just screaming. I was like, "Run, Jasmine, run." And I looked, and I saw her holding her legs, and I couldn't understand why she wasn't going. And so I turned around, and I turned around and I looked down, and I see these hands, and they're waving up at me like in a motion like this. And I grab the person's hands and I lock them. And I pull the person, and I think it was a male, because when I put my hand on his shoulder, it felt like strong. And I pulled him in between the seats, and I bent down, and I said, "Are you okay?" And then I looked up, and I didn't see my kids, and I panicked. And then when I went in to get up, I saw a woman laying there on the steps, and she appeared to be deceased with some head trauma. And so I hopped over. I had to step over her, and I kind of stopped for a minute, and I kind of looked, because I was still not really sure what was going on. And I remember seeing like the reflection of the blood against the movie on the rail. You know, how there's steps that go up, and there's the rail seating. I can remember seeing the reflection of the blood shining off of that, and people and arms and yelling. And when I kind of did, I scanned down, I could see people on the floor seats. They were looking up from underneath their seats at me. And I remember just thinking, okay, you know, where's the kids? And then I look to go down, and I see a male that appeared to be deceased at the bottom of the stairs, and I jumped over him, and I proceeded to go out the left exit out to the lobby. And when I left the lobby doors, I looked around, and I saw people that they were just standing there, and I didn't understand, and I was just screaming at them to run. And I remember running out the lobby doors, and I was screaming. I was like, "Armando, Anna." And I see Annalise, she's standing there right in front of the doors next to a tree. And she's like, "Mom, Mom." And then I start screaming for Armando, and he comes running out from the right side. There was like a brick partition wall. He come running from behind there. And so we get together, and as we're going out into the parking lot, I see Tony and Bryson Bilipondo, and Bryson's like, "Hey, we're going to the hospital."
And hearsay confrontation.
I'm sorry.
Sustained.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Carbonell, I'm going to stop
that's
you right
fine.
there. Now, did you have to seek any medical attention for yourself?
Yes, I did.
What was that for?
In the theater, I was grazed by something, and when I was running out of the theater, I had lost my shoes, and I had a puncture in the bottom of my foot from a stick.
Right, and where were you, did you go somewhere to seek your medical attention?
Yes, I went to University Hospital.
Right. Your Honor, if I may approach the witness with what's been marked as People's Exhibits 2550, 2549, 1117, and 4678.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Carbonell, could you please look at 2550?
Yes?
All right, do you recognize the person in that photograph?
Yes, I do.
Who is it?
That is me.
All right, and does that fairly and accurately represent what you looked like on July 20th of 2012?
Yes.
And does that photograph depict any of your injuries?
This one, 2550, no, but the next one does.
And is that 2549?
Yes?
And what does that photograph depict?
It is the picture of my graze as well as my legs covered in blood.
All right. And does that fairly and accurately depict your injuries on July 20th of 2012?
Yes.
Now, if you could please look at diagram 1117.
Yes.
All right. Do you recognize that diagram?
Wait, 1117. Yes.
All right. And is that a diagram that you drew of where you were seated at the theater and things you observed?
Yes.
All right. And does that fairly and accurately depict where you believe you sat in the theater on July 20th of 2012?
Yes.
And do you recognize 4678?
Same diagram?
Oh, sorry, the next exhibit, 4678?
Yes.
All right, and what is that?
That is a picture of Alex Holman.
Your Honor, at this time I would move for the admission of People's Exhibits 2550, 2549, 1117, and 4678.
Has 4678 been admitted before?
Yes, Your Honor. Sorry, so I just moved to publish that one.
All right. Is there any objection to the admission of 2549, 2550, and 1117? And that would be P-TR, 2549, 2550, and 1117. Ms. Spangler?
Sorry, I lost the numbers. I can tell before.
Could you show the
Sure,
pictures to her again,
And I-
please,
and I
so
did,
that she
Your Honor,
understands
previously.
which one you're moving to admit?
Object to the publication of 4678. It's cumulative, it's already been published to the jury. We would object to 2550, as that is the photograph that the witness said did not depict her injuries that night. You do not object to the other two.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Your objection on 2550, I couldn't hear you.
She indicated that the picture did not depict her injuries that evening.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Hold on, give me just a second. I'll sustain the objection as to 2550, but I'll let you establish more foundation if you want, Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Your Honor.
2549 is admitted and may be published, and 117 is admitted and may be published. 4678 has been published before. So the objection to publishing that one again is sustained. You may proceed on 2550, P-TR-2550. Go ahead.
Thank you. Ms. Carbonell, I'm going to approach you with this photograph again. Now, looking at this photograph more carefully, if you look at the bottom of your legs, are the injuries of your legs visible in that photograph?
Yes, one is just more of a close-up.
So People's Exhibit 2549 is just a close-up that depicts the injuries on your
Yes.
legs, but that's also visible in 2550.
Yes.
But 2550, you can tell that that's actually you.
Yes, it is me.
And the other picture is just a picture of a leg.
Well, it's still me.
Two legs, but still
Two
you.
legs. Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I would move for the admission of People's Exhibits 2550.
Any objection based on that additional foundation?
No objection.
Without objection, P-TR-2550 is admitted and may be published.
May I please have 2550? And is that the photograph that depicts you on the night of July 20th of 2012?
Yes.
May I please have 2549? Is that a close-up of the injuries on your leg on July 20th of 2012?
Yes.
May I please have People's Exhibit 1117? All right, and Ms. Carbonell, there's a microphone up there, behind you, if I could ask you to turn it on, please. And there is a big stick behind you. If you could use that, thank you. And if you could just show the jury where you were seated in the theater, please.
Sorry, I don't want to look you. So I was seated right here. and my son Armando was seated here, and my daughter Annalise was seated here.
And how did you exit the theater?
I exited down the left aisle.
All right, and what is that red thing that depicts close to row 10?
This one right here. That is where I helped the individual up and pulled him in between the seats.
Right, and then down at the bottom where there's a C, what does that depict?
That depicts the gentleman that I thought that was deceased.
Right. Thank you very much. You can have a seat. I have no further questions of this witness. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, would counsel please approach? Spengler, any cross-examination?
No.
And there do not appear to be any questions from the jury, so may this witness be released from her subpoena?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
Is there any objection, Ms. Spengler?
No objection.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
Turn the people called Sukumar and J.R. Houghton.
Could I have you raise your right hand? Solemnly swear or affirm, penalty of law, that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please be seated.
Thank you.
Please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names.
My full name is Sukumar Vijayaraghavan, and the first name is spelled Sukumar, and the last name is Vijayaraghavan.
So just as it sounds.
Just as it sounds.
All right, Mr. Brockler, you may proceed.
Sir, would you please tell us what you do for a living?
I am a professor at the Department of Physiology and the director of the Neuroscience graduate program at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Center.
Here's what I'm going to ask of you, sir. If you would pull that microphone up even just a little bit closer. You're a little soft.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great. Hey, here's what I want to do now that you've identified yourself as the director of that neuroscience program. I want to step back and ask you about you and your credentials and qualifications that led you to that job. Then I want to talk to you about the program itself that the defendant went through between 2011 and 2012. And then I want to talk to you about the defendant, okay?
Okay.
First off, let's talk a little bit about you. How does someone become a professor of, did you say physiology?
Yes.
How did you become that?
Well, I got my PhD in biochemistry. Then I did a few years of postdoctoral training at the University of California at San Diego. And then I joined the Department of Physiology here as an assistant professor and rose up the ranks to be a professor as I am today.
Okay, and again, I'm going to ask you to just keep your voice up as much as you can, just so everyone can hear you. Now,
Okay.
I detect a bit of an accent. Are you from Texas?
Yeah, Minnesota.
Is it? Now, when you're a professor of physiology with that PhD, how do you work your way into neuroscience?
Well, my topic of research is examining how cells in the brain signal to each other and how that signaling can be modified by drugs of abuse like nicotine. and that makes me a bona fide neuroscientist.
Maybe it's worth a description of what is neuroscience.
Okay, so the neuroscience in general is a study of how the nervous system works, how the brain is put together, how it develops, how it signals, and how do information from outside world gets processed in the brain, and by what mechanisms do they get processed, and how it applies to various diseases and disorders of the brain.
Is that multidisciplinary in its approach?
It is very multidisciplinary in its approach.
Now, I use that word because you used that word with me earlier. Would you tell us, what does that mean, multidisciplinary?
It means it involves skills from a number of disciplines ranging from physics, chemistry, pharmacology, physiology, and cell biology, and brain imaging, and so on.
At the University of Colorado, at that Anschutz campus just up the road from us here, do they have a program for neuroscience?
Yes, they do have a graduate program for neuroscience.
Now, is that different than having, say, a school of neuroscience?
Well, it is different in the sense that we don't have an undergraduate degree in neuroscience. So most students who come into the neuroscience program have finished their graduate and have the undergraduate degree, and then come in for a PhD into the program.
Now, you've said you're the director of the neuroscience program currently. Were you the director back when the defendant was part of that program?
No, I was the chair of the graduate training committee at that point.
Tell us what the graduate training committee is.
The graduate training committee consists of 5 members of the faculty who are in charge of monitoring student progress, how they do, helping them make decisions during their PhD tenure, and facilitating their path towards a successful completion of their degree.
When you were in that role, did you have responsibilities regarding the recruiting of that next class of PhD candidates?
I didn't. I was part of the admissions committee as a member of the graduate training committee. So the admissions committee is a separate committee that consists of other faculty members who screen applications, decide who to invite for interview, conduct interviews, and so on. And I was part of that committee.
Now, this particular program at the University of Colorado, are there many like it in the United States?
I think there are many neuroscience programs, yes.
Where does this one rank, the one that you're a part of?
It's hard to know how one ranks these programs, but one ranking would be by the award of these training grants. There are 28 in this country, and we are one of them.
Okay. Is it a competitive process to become a PhD candidate?
Yes, it is. To enter the program, we get about 70, 75 applications for a class of 6 or 5 or 6.
Now, in this particular process that you're going to describe for us, is this how you go from 75 applicants down to the 6 that you chose back in the 2011-2012
Yes.
class? Tell us how that worked.
So it's a national application process. People apply to the program, and the admissions committee screens all the applications. And the applications contain the following information. One, their credentials, where they did their undergrad, their GPAs, their GRE scores. Then they have a statement of purpose where the candidate describes why they want to do research and why they want to be in the program. And then there are letters of references from people they have worked with in the past. And we also look for people who have had some research experience so that they know what they're getting into. And based on all these criteria, we narrow that process down to about 12 to 13 people we invite for interviews. And this interview consists of,
I'm sorry to stop you. There's a couple things I wanted to back up with you, and then we'll pick up right from there, okay?
Okay.
One of them was you mentioned a GRE. Not everyone may know what that is. What's the GRE?
It's the graduate record exam. It's an exam that all students, in fact, most, if not all, graduate programs, PhD programs require GRE. So it's a national exam conducted by the ETS, or the Educational Testing Service, and the students are graded on their verbal, quantitative, and analytical skills, and they are ranked in percentiles, with the 99th percentile meaning that most people are below, you are at the 99th percent or higher.
Also, you mentioned letters of reference. Prior to making the decision to offer someone admission into this program, do you follow up on those letters of reference and call people, or do you go just off of the documentary application that you've received?
It is both. So very often the letters are straightforward enough that we take them at face value. Sometimes we do call back and get some clarifications.
Now, to whittle this group down from approximately 75 down to 13, what caliber of applicants are you getting?
Could you be more specific as to what you want me to say?
And I don't know the answer to this, but are you getting people who have an undergraduate degree in music applying to neuroscience? Does that happen? I don't know.
There are probably not music, but we do have undergrads who've finished their degree in physics. We do have people who've done. We've had one student from the Colorado School of Mines with engineering backgrounds. We have people who might have a psychology background, and people who have molecular biology or cell biology backgrounds.
It sounds like it's pretty diverse, like science or science and math.
Yes, and we really look at their performance in science in general when we make these decisions.
So you've whittled it down now to 13. What are you using to make the decision that that 14th person or that 50th person isn't getting there? Is it just straight GRE score?
No, this is a combination of all the criteria that I mentioned. So it's a mixture of what overall idea of whether we feel so-and-so would be good at a career in research or not.
So you have these 12 or 13 folks, and you said you invite them out for interviews?
Yes.
What time of year do you do that?
This is usually in February.
Of the year before they're going to start?
Of the year that they're going to start. They start in fall. That's in August, September, and the interviews happen in February.
All right, now, we're going to keep talking about this process, but I want to incorporate in the defendant in this case. Now, back in 2011, did someone named James Egan Holmes apply to your program?
Yes.
And did he make it through that initial cut to get down to the interview process?
Yes.
This guy's seated over here at the table in this light green, I think it's a light green shirt, right here with the glasses and the mustache and the beard. Is that who you know to be James Holmes?
Yes.
That particular individual got invited out for an interview?
Yes.
Were you part of that process?
Yes.
Tell us about how that process works in general, and then we'll talk about how it worked with the defendant.
Okay. So in general, this is a process that is sort of coordinated with all graduate programs on campus. So for all programs, the people who have been invited for interviews are brought in. They are housed at a hotel. Usually it's the Renaissance at the Stapleton, and then they're here for 2 days. The first day begins with the morning, where they would come into the program office, and the director of the program presents the program to them, gives them information about the program, what's good about it, why they should be interested in our program. And then they go through about 6 or 7 individual interviews with faculty, each of which last about 30 to 35 minutes.
Back in February of 2011, did the defendant go through that process?
Yes.
Were you one of the interviews that he did?
Yes.
Tell us about your observations of him in that interview.
I rated him quite highly. So the rating is from a score of 1 to 5, 1 being the best and 5 being the worst. And I think I rated him at about 1.5 or 2. He appeared to be extremely quiet, very reserved, but as I talked to him more and more about his science as well as my science, I was quite impressed by the fact that he understood what my project was about, asked some good questions, and my overall impression was that he was quiet and a little socially awkward, but definitely somebody who had the caliber to be in the program.
Now, before you interviewed him, you had the opportunity to look at his application, including the letters of reference, the GRE, the GPA from undergrad, and all that stuff. True?
Yes.
How did he rate on paper?
I think on paper he was among the top of our pool of interviewees.
Now, in terms of that interaction with you and the other professors with whom he interviewed, did he rate as highly in person as he did on paper?
Probably not. But I think the common concerns that was echoed through all the interviews was that he was sort of withdrawn, not very interactive, and hard to get a sense of.
Now, look, in the course of your time doing this, making these selections, how many people like the defendant do you think that you have interviewed through this process?
Well, totally, I've interviewed maybe a few hundred students. Yeah.
And these several hundred students are all applying to be scientists?
Yes.
Where would you put the defendant in sort of that, what you've described as socially, I can't remember the word you used, limited, or what was the word you used?
Awkward.
Awkward, socially awkward. Where would you put him in that group?
I would put him at one end of the group with people who are socially awkward and who are more introverted and not very communicative, but along with a few of the people I've interviewed, yes.
You've seen other people as introverted and socially awkward as the defendant?
Yes.
And they've gone on to be good scientists?
Yes.
Is there anything about being a good scientist that requires you to not be introverted?
You mean in a career of a scientist?
At this entry-level stage?
At this entry-level stage, I think communication skills are important, but not necessarily in a social context. The ability to stand up and present your work, for example. I mean, those are skills that are important to succeed at this stage.
Now, in addition to the interviews with these 6 or 7 different professors, were there other opportunities for the defendant and other PhD would-be candidates to interact with other students?
Yes, so as I was saying, so on the day of the interview, each incoming interviewee is assigned a student from the program, and at the end of the interviews, the students host events, social events, where they get to know and get to interact with the candidates, and there's also an event where they're taken around the city to show what the city looks like and where living opportunities and so on. And all that is done by the students, so they do get a lot of opportunities to interact with students.
Based on everything that you go through in this process with the defendant, is he ultimately offered a spot in this neuroscience program?
Yes.
How many others were offered a spot in 2011?
Maybe about 10. I'm not very sure it's the exact number.
Could be as little as 6?
I think we make more offers than how many accepted.
Thank you.
So there are about 6 who accepted.
Okay, thank you. And all of those people competitive candidates?
Yes.
Great grades?
Yes.
Good GRE scores?
Yes.
Good interviews?
Yes.
Okay. This offer gets made to the defendant when? At what point in the year?
The offers are made usually within a week of the interviews, so in February itself.
Now, you said the program starts in the fall, typically August?
Yes.
Now, was there an opportunity for the defendant to come out earlier that year and already start participating in a lab?
That is an opportunity that students have, but that is something that's arranged with particular labs and not necessarily as a program activity.
Okay. And is that something that the defendant availed himself of back in 2011?
I think he did.
Yeah, coming out to a lab in June with Professor Klug. Does that sound right?
Right.
Now, before we start talking about the lab and how it all fits together, I want you to describe for us this particular program that the defendant is entering into that's going to last him from August to approximately June of 2012, okay? Is it all just classroom work?
No, it's not all classroom work, but there is a lot of classroom work, but there is also opportunities for the students to go through different labs during the course of the first year, where they get to do research in these labs for periods of 11 to 12 weeks, and where the mentor in the lab and the student can sort of explore a particular area, figure out what they're interested in, figure out whether they would be a good fit, and the student gets to decide which of these labs would be a good fit to do his thesis on.
Is it fair to describe this program as having the classroom component and the laboratory component?
Yes.
And they're not necessarily even completely matched in terms of when they start and stop?
Yeah, they're not matched.
Okay. There are grades given for all of these things?
Yes.
Now, for the labs, how many credits do you get for a lab in figuring out your GPA?
You get each of these lab rotations are 1 credit.
But it's way more important than that, isn't it?
Yes, it is, because it helps the student to actually make a decision on what they're going to be doing research on.
Now, you've described 3 labs that every student has the opportunity to go through, and we'll talk about when they occurred during the year. But once you get past that first year, how do you go on to get your PhD? How do you go on to become a doctor?
So at the end of the first year, you rotated through 3 labs and you've finished your coursework. You do a preliminary exam which qualifies you to go into the second year and continue in the program. And at that same time, they make a decision based on the labs they've rotated, which lab they'd like to do their thesis in. And upon agreement, a mutual agreement of the mentor and the student enters that lab around July at the end of the first year. And once he enters the lab, they go through a period of about a year and a half where they're developing research projects. At the end of that period, they have to take this exam called the comprehensive exam, where they have a committee of scientists who they choose to be their advisors, and they present to the whole program their thesis project and what they plan to do. And then they have a closed-door exam with their committee for about a couple of hours, where they are tested on how much they know, how much they've thought about, what their reasoning skills are, and at the end of it, if they pass the the comprehensive exams, then they get to advance to candidacy. That's when they become a candidate for PhD. And then they continue working on their projects based on the proposal that they made, and it takes another maybe 2.5 years of work, at which point, if the committee, the advisor, and the student are all agree upon it, then they decide on a date where the thesis can be defended. And the student then writes up a thesis, which is a compilation of all the research that he did, and they're supposed to publish papers in the interim, and then they present their whole thesis to the whole program, and then the committee meets and decides whether or not to award them the degree.
I feel like I just got the PhD. Thank you. the thing I want to get back to is this. If you can't, you as a student, if you can't find a lab that you want to do or a lab that wants to bring you on board, that keeps you from progressing through the rest of the program?
Yes,
So these 3 labs are pretty critical.
yes.
The preliminary examination that you talked about that takes place at the end of the year, if you cannot get passing marks through that preliminary examination, you can't progress through the rest of the program?
Objection leading.
It's a follow-up, so I'll allow it. It's just overruled.
Go ahead,
You
sir.
can answer.
It's if a student does not pass the prelims, usually the committee that examines him meets and decides whether to give him further opportunity to repeat it or repeat parts of it, or to take remedial actions like taking extra courses in the second year. So it's not the be-all and end-all.
Okay, not like the rotation part?
Not like not finding a lab. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. All right. For the defendant, back in 2011, 2012, every student is assigned a mentor?
Yes.
Objection leading.
It was foundational overruled.
Is that yes, sir?
Yes,
And who was the defendant's mentor during 2011, 2012?
that was me.
Now, because you're his mentor, did you have increased contact with him versus other members of the admissions committee or the training committee?
Once he got here, probably yes.
How often would you meet with him?
I would say we met on average maybe once a month.
What was the purpose of your mentor relationship with the defendant?
The purpose of the first year mentor is to make sure that the student is progressing and is on track and try to address try to identify any potential weaknesses and see if we can ameliorate those weaknesses.
Now, in this first lab, do you remember who the defendant had as his lab professor?
That was Professor Akim Klug.
Now, I've seen the initials PI associated with each of these labs. What is a PI?
A PI just stands for the principal investigator. That's the person who runs the lab and in whose name, who gets grant funded too.
Okay, now we're going to hear from Professor Klug in a bit. But during the course of that lab and towards its end, did you receive feedback on the defendant's performance?
Yes.
And based on the feedback that you received, did you speak with the defendant about things he could do to improve?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I think the feedback from the first rotation was again a question of not being engaged, not being interactive, and not getting as much done as one could. And those were things that I think we did discuss and say that needs to be improved.
Now, did you interpret that to be something that is an intellectual limitation or an effort-based limitation?
At that point, probably an effort-based limitation.
Okay. And is there a lot of social aspect to the laboratory portion of this program?
Could you repeat that, please?
Is there a social aspect of this laboratory part of the program?
Usually there is, because you spend a lot of time with the people who are already in the lab, and so there's a lot of interactions, both scientific as well as non-scientific.
Is there a presentation at the conclusion of each one of these 3 labs?
Yes, so there are what are known as rotation talks, where the students come and present what they did during that period of rotation to the faculty in the program at large.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what's been marked as People's Exhibit 1195?
Yes.
Hey, sir, I'm handing you this aforementioned People's Exhibit 1195. Do you recognize what that is?
Yes.
Tell us what that is.
So this is an online evaluation sheet that was filled in by me after the first rotation.
And is this an evaluation that you did of the defendant after his presentation that we just described?
Yes.
Do you remember whenabouts that would have taken place?
This could have been within a week or so after the rotation talks, which would have been in November, sometime in November
Of 2011.
2011.
Now, for this presentation talk, where is it given?
It's given in the seminar room of the program.
Who all attends?
All the faculty and the students attend this.
How many people is that?
I would say on any day at least about 50 to 60 people.
50 to 60 people? A lot of them that we call doctors?
Yeah.
Okay. In these presentations, is there use of PowerPoint?
Yes.
And did the defendant develop a PowerPoint that you recall for this?
Yes.
How long is the talk given?
The talk is usually 15 to 20 minutes.
During the talk, does the student or candidate field questions from the crowd, or are they just simply being critiqued afterwards?
No, they do at the end of the talk, they field questions from the audience.
So you got to be on your game for this.
Yes.
All right. Pretty daunting.
Yes.
So in this particular case, you had the opportunity to evaluate the defendant on his first rotation presentation, and that document right there, 1195, does that accurately reflect the evaluation that you gave him back in November of 2011?
Yes.
Doesn't look like anybody's added or taken away anything from it?
No.
I'm going to move for the admission of 1195 into evidence.
Is there any objection to the admission of P-TR 1195?
No objection.
Without objection, P-TR-1195 is admitted and may be published.
Now, before we even think about putting this up, now I had put up some of this in opening statement, and there was a green and yellow and red boxes on this. Can you talk us through what those mean?
So there are a number of categories on which we grade the students, and it's graded as 1, 2, and 3, 1 being the best and 3 being the worst. So it's a simple 3-point grading system.
Is 3 equated with, it looks like a traffic signal, is 3 equated with red?
Yes, and 2 is yellow and 1 is green.
Okay. In this particular evaluation, how many different categories do you have to evaluate the defendant on?
A number of them. There are 11 categories here.
They cover the gamut of presentation substance versus style, that sort of stuff?
Yes.
Now, were there things that that you rated the defendant a 1 on, a green on?
I think it looks like the project background and rationale were adequately presented. I think so that was rated a 1. Experimental approach was adequately explained. That was rated 1. Data were analyzed appropriately. Conclusions were drawn logically. Slides were clear and easy to understand. And overall, the slides were well organized.
Were there cautionary things about your evaluation regarding the defendant's performance?
Yes, there were so there were other categories in which he got a 2. One was hypothesis not being that clearly stated. Quality of data, voice, speaking volume, mannerisms of the student, and then student responded appropriately to comments and questions from the audience. That was a little weak as well.
All right. Now, you also had a place where you could put some narrative comments in there?
Yes.
What was the gist of what you took away from the defendant's performance on this first lab rotation talk back in November of 2011?
So there were 2 concerns that were noted. One is better speaking skills, learn to appear more interested in communicating with the audience, and he was much better when he spoke to the audience rather than facing the screen and speaking in that direction. And the second concern was with organization. And it says, while it's okay for a rotation project to confirm existing findings, those findings need to be presented first rather than in the middle of the project.
All in all, for a first rotation presentation, in your experience of doing this now for, how many years have you been doing it?
I don't know, about 10, 12 years maybe.
10 or 12 years. How would you rate this performance?
I would say it was probably an average performance.
Average performance. Now, did you have an opportunity to share with the defendant your concerns and suggestions on how to improve?
Yes.
And how did he respond to that?
I think he was always very deferential and took my suggestions quite seriously throughout my interactions with him.
Now, was he more engaging or more talkative with you about this than he had been before, or was it more receptive to your advice?
I think he was more receptive, not more talkative.
And during your entire time with him, always polite?
Yes.
Always professional?
Yes.
After this evaluation, in the end of that first rotation, what happens next for the students?
At the end of the first rotation, after the evaluation, they by this time would have entered their second rotation labs.
Okay. And did the defendant do that?
Yes.
Do you remember the name of the person he did his second rotation
He
with?
did a second rotation with Professor Mark Delacroix.
And we'll hear from Professor Delacroix. Is it doctor or professor? What do you guys go by?
Professor. Well,
Professor? Is there one better than the other? Doctor, professor?
Yeah. Anything. Call us anything you want.
Okay. That guy,
Yeah.
Delacroix, professor, we're going to hear from him. Did you get feedback, without going into the details of it, did you get feedback from Professor Delacroix about the defendant's performance on that second rotation?
Yes.
Now, that second rotation, you said starts in roughly November, and when does it end?
It ends in February some point.
Ends in February. And by the way, all along the times of these rotations, there's also classwork being done during the week.
Yes.
All right. That second rotation, did you have the opportunity to have more contact with the defendant about ways that he could improve?
Yes.
In general, without getting into all the specifics, were the concerns of the second rotation for the defendant similar to the first rotation?
It was similar to the first. The concerns were similar, but I think the professor was more firm in his decision
They did not get along.
that he didn't want him in the lab. Yes.
Okay. That ends in about February, and then there's a third lab rotation.
Yes.
And do you remember who the defendant had for his third lab rotation?
With Professor Kurt Fried.
Okay, and we're going to hear from Professor Kurt Fried as well. Do you remember what concerns in general were expressed by Professor Fried about the defendant?
The concerns that Professor Fried expressed were again similar in that he seemed not engaged in the lab, in the science. He wasn't communicating well with either Professor Fried or to other people in the lab, and he was concerned about what effect his presence in the lab might influence the morale of the lab.
Pretty consistent throughout these three labs.
Yes.
Now, you've also had the opportunity when you, in the position you're in, to monitor the schoolwork progress of these, of the other 5 students over this course?
Yes.
Now, did you have the opportunity to determine what the average GPA for the fall and the spring were for the students not including the defendant?
The average GPA for the fall and this was about 3.35 or something to that effect, and the average for the spring was 3.7.
And overall, do you remember what the average
Overall, I
was?
think it was about 3.5.
Okay, and we'll have someone come later and talk about the grades for the defendant specifically. One of the ways in which you've said you've communicated is you've had face-to-face meetings with the defendant. And how many do you think you had over the course of the time you were with him?
Probably 10, 12 maybe.
Okay, and we'll talk about those, the last one in a bit here. But leading up to June, were all of the meetings pretty consistent with the defendant in terms of his presentation and demeanor?
Yes.
Did you also have the opportunity to communicate with him in writing?
Yes, by emails, yes.
Do you make any distinction between the way he communicated with you in writing and the way he presented in person?
It's hard for me to compare the two. I think he was very polite both in presence, in verbal communications as well as in emails.
That's those emails. That should be the hard copy of them. I've just tabbed them here for the dates. Yep. Could I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor, with what's been marked as People's Exhibit 1200?
Yes.
Sir, I'm handing you this People's Exhibit 1200. Take a look at that and tell me if you recognize what is in there.
These are all more or less housekeeping emails where I've asked him about his rotations, his rehearsing his rotation talk with me before presenting it to the rest of the audience and so forth.
Is that pretty normal, by the way?
That's very normal.
Now, in terms of that packet, that People's 1200, does that include every single email ever possibly sent between you and the defendant? Or just a sampling of them?
I would suspect that it has all, if not most, if not all of the emails I've sent.
Do those emails that you've had the chance to review before you came in here, do those look accurate? Like these are the communications that you and he shared over email over that period of time?
Yes.
Does it look like anybody has altered them or changed them in any way?
No.
Okay. I'm going to talk to you about some things that lead up to the last couple, and then I'll ask the court to move to admit those. When we were talking before about some of the concerns that you shared with the defendant and led to you giving him some advice on how to improve, I didn't ask you for specific details about what the professors would say, but I want to talk to you about what you talked to him about, okay? Were there ever concerns brought to your attention that you relayed to him about humor in presentations?
There was one occasion where a concern was raised about inappropriate humor, or it's just humor in presentations that didn't work.
Now, when you say inappropriate humor, the non-science guy thinks one thing, but tell us for the science world what inappropriate humor means.
It didn't. It basically meant that he inserted, funny jokes in the middle that didn't work and distracted from the rest of his presentation and substance.
And that was it? That was the complaint that you got from someone that, hey, this just isn't the right forum for any humor?
I guess the complaint was that, it wasn't the forum. I think the complaint was that it just distracted. No, it wasn't the right thing to do.
Do you remember what it was?
It was about some factor, which I don't remember, which could be abbreviated as ATM, and there was a joke which said, to the effect that I've characterized this ATM and you can take it to the bank, which...
And scientists don't find that funny?
Oh, well, I found it funny, but not everybody.
Okay. And so you talked with the defendant about, hey, let's tone down some of the humor part of this.
Yes.
And he seemed amenable to that.
Absolutely.
All right. And does it seem like he made that change moving forward with the other presentations?
Yes, he did.
Never got that complaint again?
No.
Okay. Now, for the preliminary exam, you'd mentioned that earlier. That particular exam, is it a capstone type test for the year that you've had in neuroscience?
Yes.
Well, and you know what, don't use my word. Just describe for us what it is and whether it's written or oral, all of that.
Okay, so it's an oral exam, or it was in 2011 an oral exam, and it was conducted by a committee of faculty who had participated in teaching the first-year students throughout the year, and there were two committees of 3 faculty each representing three major areas of neuroscience, and the oral interview consisted of, or the oral exam consisted of them asking questions, testing students' ability to reason, to think on their feet, their conceptual knowledge, and so forth.
And those three professors are peppering them with questions?
Yeah.
What is the scope of the material covered?
The scope of the material covered is essentially the material that was covered in various lectures throughout the course of the year.
And as the PhD candidate person, you're just responsible for being up to speed on all that?
Yes.
Now, before we start to get to this performance stuff, there's a couple areas I want to talk to you about. You had the opportunity to meet with the defendant one-on-one. Describe his demeanor and his affect to you in those settings?
I think his demeanor has always been courteous but withdrawn. His affect was flat. No, I never seen him get very excited or enthusiastic, at least outwardly. And he, throughout the process, came across as a person who was very introverted and socially awkward.
It didn't say a lot of words.
Yeah, I mean, I think didn't say a lot of unnecessary words.
Okay. For the presentations that you had the opportunity to observe, how was his demeanor and affect?
Essentially, it was the same criticism in the sense that his presentations were more mechanical, lacked enough affect, and definitely lacked the enthusiasm that could be communicated to an audience in such settings like these.
So do you remember the date of the prelims for the defendant back in 2012?
It was June 7th, I believe.
All right. Now, you give those students a lot of advance notice on this?
Yes.
And you weren't participating in the prelims?
No.
Did you get feedback after the conclusion of those prelims?
Yes.
And all 6 students in neuroscience do it on one day?
Yes.
And the defendant did it?
Yes.
Now, up to that point, by the way, had you ever received any feedback the defendant didn't come to class?
Not that it was communicated to me.
How about that he wasn't coming to the lab?
Again, no.
That he wasn't turning in his homework?
No.
All right. And in this particular case, he shows up, as far as you know, on time, at the right place, at the right time?
Yes.
You got feedback on his presentation, and, well, tell us what the feedback was.
I think the feedback was essentially that there were a lot of conceptual weaknesses. There was weaknesses in using concepts and reasoning abilities to extrapolate, a concept to the next level. And I think those probably were the major concerns.
Now, at that point, had you just made the decision, that's it then, we're just going to part ways with the defendant?
No.
Why not?
It is, so I had talked with his committee, which consisted of the 3 faculty members, and talked about how bad was it something that's redeemable, and the conclusion we arrived at was that he should be given another chance to take the prelims, and he should, before that, talk with the members of the committee to know what his weaknesses were, and then be given some time to prepare for a retake.
Now, had this happened before in your 10 to 12 years there, that someone has had to retake the prelims?
Yes. Yes. It has happened. So the prelims, let me just clarify that.
Sure.
So the prelims, when we see weaknesses, we have the students do remedial stuff, and that has happened many times before, where the student has been said, you are weak in this, you need to get better handle on the concepts in this, and we want you to go into the second year and retake this course, for example. And those kind of decisions have been made a number of times in the past. But I don't think the entire prelim exam has been retaken.
And have you had people that have been offered the opportunity to take the prelims again and have made the decision to just drop out of the program?
Not at that juncture, no. But we have had people who drop out of the program for other reasons.
Okay. There was also the issue with the rotations.
Yeah.
And the possibility that the defendant would have to do what if he was going to find a rotation?
Could you rephrase that question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. If someone doesn't find a rotation that they can join, that either they want to join or the doctor wants to join them out of those three, what does the program do for them?
So the programs, at this point in their training, the job of the program, the graduate training committee, is to make sure they all find homes to do their thesis. And in this particular case, I knew for sure that Dr. Delacqua wasn't going to take him, but I hadn't gotten a firm no from either Dr. Klug or Dr. Fried. So I was in the midst of talking to them to see if they would take him in the lab.
And you don't know what they expressed to the defendant at that point about any concerns they had?
I don't know the details of any concerns that they expressed, yes.
Okay. Now, in terms of the performance of the defendant on the prelims, and frankly, over the course of the year, you had said, coming in, he had these great grades, this great GRE score. Did you have different expectations for his performance in the classroom and laboratory setting?
Yes.
And he failed to achieve those?
Yes.
Is that the first time someone has failed to appear in person and in labs as they did on paper?
Probably not.
Now, is there a big difference in your experience between undergrad and this program?
There is a big difference between undergrad and graduate program, yes.
What is it?
The main difference, I would say, would be that if you enter a research program, a lot of your success depends on things like self-motivation, the ability to learn on your own, the ability to learn to reason well, to design experiments. I mean, those are not things that are critical to success in an undergrad setting, but they are to a graduate program setting.
And they're different even than just the regular classroom work?
Yes.
And that's where you find that out, is in those labs?
Could you rephrase that again?
Yeah, that's where you find out whether someone has the initiative, the self-motivation, the creativity to come up with their own experiments is in that lab?
Yes.
Okay. Now, after you get the feedback on the defendant's performance on the prelims, do you reach out to him?
Yes.
How'd you do it?
I sent him an email asking him to come and meet me.
And did you guys have an exchange in email about setting up that meeting?
Yes.
Are those emails contained in People's Exhibit 1200? Towards the back?
Yes.
All right, now tell us, did you end up having that meeting with the defendant?
Yes.
Was it in your office?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
It was a short meeting. It was much shorter than I had anticipated, and we just met for maybe a few minutes, and I had sent him an email saying that the reviewers were concerned about the examiners were concerned about his performance in the prelims, and that we needed to talk about it. My intention was to give him that feedback and set up times to do a retake. So when he came in, I said, you did poorly in the exam. I think I also said something to the effect of, is this what you wanted to do? No, is this what you want to do with as a career? And that we would have a retake of the exam, at which point he told me that he had decided to quit the program.
And was that unexpected?
That was unexpected.
And how did he tell you?
I think he just said he decided to leave the program.
And did you try to talk him out of it?
No, I think I said, no, if that's what is best, you feel is best for you, that's something that we could go with.
What's the rest of that conversation that you had with him?
I think the gist of the conversation is what I just relayed. I'm not sure exactly what else.
I mean, does it end with a handshake, a hug, chest bump? How does it end?
Yeah, high fives. No, I think it just ended quite cordially, and he said he was planning to leave, and I said, if you're planning to leave, then you need to send me an official email saying that you are, with effect, immediately leaving the program.
And did he do that?
Yes.
Is that also contained in People's Exhibit 1200?
Yes.
Describe for us his demeanor and his presentation to you in that final meeting.
I think his demeanor was still reserved, still withdrawn, and still devoid of affect.
Now listen, over the course of this time, from the time that you first interview with him in February of 2011 until he is walking out of your office in June, I may not have asked you this, Doctor, what day was it in June that you met with him?
This was June 9th, I think.
June 9th.
Yeah.
Is he the same guy over that whole period of time? I mean, did you detect any big differences between him in February of 2011 and June of 2012?
Members of the jury, it's 3:35, so I think it's a good time to take our afternoon break. So let's take 20 minutes. Please keep all the admonitions that I have been giving you in mind and continue to comply with all of them. Enjoy the break.
This is it. This is the whole game.
The record should reflect that the jury has exited the courtroom, and doctor will have you wait outside. Is it doctor or professor? Either way. All right, thank you.
Should I leave this?
You can leave that there, yes, thank you.
I included by error on the back of the exhibit copy I gave to the public defender a sheet that's not, or if it's a subpoena on another case that we grab up.
Here, I'll have Late take a look at it. Everyone may be seated, by the way. No? Okay. All right, the objection is as to relevance and cumulative. Do you want to respond?
I do, Your Honor. As to relevance, in this case, the defendant has put his mental health at issue. This goes to his state of mind, ability to function, his ability to respond, a lot of cognitive different things in his responses to and from this particular mentor over the period of, I think it covers August to June of the time in question, leading up to about 6 weeks prior to the shooting in this particular case. That's why it's relevant, Your Honor. He's pleaded insanity.
All right, any response?
Your Honor, as the court can see in those emails, they're very short housekeeping emails. For example, can you meet with me Monday at 10? Yes, see you then. I don't think that has any relevance or any indication about the mental state of a person, and we would object in the ones where the professor testified about setting up the meeting in June, where Mr. Holmes said that he was quitting the program, has been testified to. There's nothing in those emails that add anything to what the professor testified to.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Last.
Yeah, yes, just very briefly, there's going to be testimony by defense experts about a deteriorating intellect and deteriorating mental state, and it's important that this guy is as responsive in June of 2012 as he was in August of 2011. There is no visible change in his ability to respond or the information he conveys from one email to the next, showing a level of consistency that rebuts that.
All right, your last reply.
Your Honor, we're not alleging he's developmentally disabled. He can still write emails if he's significantly and seriously mentally ill. Schizophrenics can write emails. He's not developmentally disabled.
Right, but I think what he was doing, how he was communicating, how he was interacting with people, how he lived, all those things become relevant when someone pleads not guilty by reason of insanity. And to the extent that there's an argument in this case that his mental health deteriorated over time, then I think it's important to allow the jury to see evidence before and after, and the jury can make a decision on its own. So it is relevant. It does have probative value. In terms of the objection with respect to cumulative, I don't think that he read verbatim the response that the defendant provided or the email that the defendant sent when he indicated that he was going to quit. I think he simply said that that email is included in the exhibit, People's Exhibit P-TR-1200. So it's not cumulative. And I will note that most of the emails are in 2012. There is one email from August of 2011. There's another email from November 2011. Then the rest of the emails are in 2012. They pick up with January 10, 2012. And then they are in chronological order. There are emails in January, February, from February jumps to May, then it goes to June, and then the last email is dated June 11 of 2012. I think that the argument that was just made by Ms. Brady goes to the weight of the evidence, not its admissibility. In terms of relevance, this has probative value. I will note that one of the theories that the prosecution has advanced in this case is that one of the motives for the shooting had to do with the defendant's failures in school. And so this is one of the issues that is in the center of the case, or at the center of the case. It's at the heart of the case. It goes to the insanity defense. The people claim that one of the things that led to the shooting was this lack of sense of purpose, which was in part caused by failures at school. Well, these are emails related to school. These are emails between the defendant and his mentor at school. And they show communications beginning in August of 2011 and ending in June of 2012. And so they do have some probative value to the defense of insanity. In terms of the objection as to relevance, it is overruled pursuant to Rules 401 and 402. In terms of the cumulative objection, it is overruled pursuant to Rule 403. So the exhibit is admitted over objection. You can take it back, Mr. Brockler. All right, folks, we'll go on break. Enjoy the break.
I will. Because I'm trying to